This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everybody. Jordan Girth here from the National Weather Service Office of Observations. Thank you so much for joining us. We got a great presentation today to start as part of the Satellite Book Club Seminar Series, session number 17. Hope everybody is well. Hope everybody's having a good end to their summer. We got a great presentation today from Dave Radell, who's the Science and Operations Officer at the Weather Forecast Office in New York, New York. And he's going to be talking to us about the GOES Stratus product to support the aviation program at the New York WFO. Just a few reminders before we get started today that we are recording this session and there's going to be plenty of time for Q&A. So go ahead and enter your questions in the chat and we'll try to get to those after his presentation. The discussion is going to be facilitated by Mike Stavish, the Science and Operations Officer at the WFO in Medford. And we really appreciate Mike for being with us today because there's a lot of active weather out there in Medford and across the West. Of course, we hope everybody that's affected by wildfires in the West is staying well and realize that some of our colleagues in the Weather Service are being affected by those evacuations. We are looking for future presenters and discussion facilitators. So if you're enjoying this forum, please get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. We're not just looking for satellite experts, but people that have a story to tell us about how satellite is helping your operations in your office. And also, if you're looking for training materials related to satellite applications, Brian Mata and the Office of Chief Learning Officer have a great team of partners, including our cooperative institutes that can help with that. So please feel free to get in touch with Brian and we'll put you in touch with, get you materials that you need. I want to thank the Tower S team, David Blutis and Lee Byerly, who have facilitated Satellite Book Club. Of course, the Office of Chief Learning Officer, the GOES program at JPSS. I also just wanted to note that the Fogging Low Stratus product, as you'll probably hear, was activated over the SBN yesterday, ending what was an 8-year transition operations process led by, started by Mike Pavlonis at the Advanced Satellite Products Branch in Madison, Wisconsin, to really devise a satellite solution that helps the field. So congratulations, Mike, for reaching the end of the transition operations journey. That's a really great thing, and we're all celebrating with you on that. Now I'd like to introduce Dave Radell, who started at the Weather Forecast Office in New York in June 2019 after a decade at Eastern Region Headquarters in Scientific Services. He has served as the Regional Satellite Program Leader and helped spearhead the first formal WFO evaluations of the GOES Fogging Low Stratus test products in 2012 and 2013 with the Operations Proving Ground. His areas of interest include probabilistic forecasting techniques, forecast verification, satellite meteorology, and integrating science into impact-based decision support services. And the WFO in New York serves almost 19 million people with 3 major airports. And I'm not sure if that's still the case today with travel reduction affected by COVID, but anyway, Dave, welcome to the Satellite Book Club. Thanks for being with us. Look forward to your presentation.
Hey, thanks, Jordan. And I'll actually show that quickly in a slide. That'll answer your first question right off the bat. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to keep this to the quote-unquote 15 minutes or so of time. Happy to be here today and excited that Fogging Low Stratus is finally making its way into operations, even though it's a suite of products that's been used in our office for a few years now, and I know other offices as well. I think one of the original nice things or attractive pieces to this particular data set actually was the fact that it was probabilistic. And if you go back, 8 years, particularly from the satellite realm, we didn't have a whole lot in the way of probabilistic information to help with our decision making. So that was one of the very first things that I can remember thinking about this particular product is being something that made it stand out from everything else. All right, just a quick, I got the GoToMeeting up there. There we go. Just a quick review and a slide or two of some of the challenges that we face. Again, at least pre-COVID, The New York City airspace, again, is among the most congested in the world. We have Kennedy International, LaGuardia, Newark, and Teterboro, all within a very short distance from each other, relatively speaking. And then the kind of unique geographic layout that we have here in terms of large bodies of water surrounding these areas, and that has a major impact on the sensible weather and on our TAF forecasting. We're also pretty aware that the NAS, the National Airspace System, is impacted by weather that occurs along the I-95 corridor, and things that, when things start to go downhill, the ripple effect or the snowball effect throughout the rest of the airspace can happen pretty quickly. So we are pretty aware of that when we are issuing our forecasts. This is kind of just a little interesting, and Jordan brought it up. This was from our friends at the CWSU, which is down the street from our office, ZNY, was taking a look at the total number of takeoffs and landings at the New York area airports, starting in early March, and then you can see kind of a break here in mid-March, and things going down to less than half, or almost a quarter as you get into this ends in the end of April here, relative to the seasonal averages. And so you can kind of see that third week in March there, where things started to basically shut down in terms of the New York airspace. That did rebound a little bit over the summer. I haven't seen the numbers as of late, but I would surmise that the values for takeoffs and landings for the New York airspace is still probably less than half of what it was, or a third, somewhere between a third and a half of what it was pre-COVID. Okay. So the problem, of course, this is for folks that are intimately involved in aviation forecasting. Low ceilings and visibility, whether it's winter or summer here, shown by the green in the pie graph. This is from a 2013 report over all of CONUS. So it does involve airports that are within terrain and things like that. But predominant cause of weather-related delays is related to low ceilings and low visibilities. In addition, you also have some of these thresholds within flight categories, so within MVFR, IFR, LAFR, that actually have some operational impacts. And so while oftentimes you're focused on the thresholds for the flight categories, oftentimes you're paying a little closer attention to some of these within thresholds as well, depending on the airport and the time of day and things like that. And one of the things that is certainly important, at least in terms of the New York City airports, is the arrival and the departure rates, keeping those up with good weather forecasts. All right, WFO New York Aviation Services. We have 9 area TAFs, again, including the major airports. We do those every 3 hours. So Kennedy, LaGuardia, Newark, Teterboro, Islip, Bridgeport, Connecticut, Westchester, Groton, Connecticut, and Stewart up in the lower Hudson Valley. And most of these airports do have commercial service of some sort, in addition to the New York City proper airports. Our TAFs are very high visibility, and by that I mean we have folks at all levels of the FAA and such that are looking at and often commenting on our TAFs. And we do have the good fortune of having pretty good collaboration, again, with the New York City WSU and the National Aviation Meteorologist, the NAMS, down there in Virginia, a couple of whom have come out of our office, actually. So how do we use the fog and low Stratus? Or I guess what I should say is how typically have we used the suite of FLS products. And so when I say that, I'm specifically referring to the probability of MVFR, IFR, and LAFR conditions. One big thing that we look at is we try to gain more information over data void areas. We have the big ocean area to the south and the southeast and the east of our area of interest, with not a lot of in situ observations. And so we rely on satellite information to get real-time real-time information about what we might expect. We use it as a decision aid. I think that's kind of an important one, or a gut check in our task preparation, to make sure that if we are in a decision point with either a routine or an amendment, that we, particularly if we have southerly flow of any sort, with stuff coming off the water, to kind of help with that, and perhaps nudge us in a different direction, or in a direction to make a decision about something. Again, the spatial extent and the confidence nudger, I kind of like that phrase. Oftentimes we'll use some of what we see in the probabilistic output from FLS to give us a little more confidence that we can expect something to occur within the next couple of hours. We've also used it, and we use it oftentimes to help convey uncertainty in our AFD. We do that routinely in our area forecast discussion, and again, depending on who's writing it at that particular time, oftentimes we can utilize FLS to help convey some uncertainty one way or the other about whether or not impacts related to low ceilings and visibility might be experienced at one of the airports. And again, from our Z and Y folks at CWSU, that all ends up there and ends up all over the place in terms of the way in which we communicate some of that stuff. And just another example there, and our strategic planning aid page that we have that folks will utilize at the CWSUs to brief FAA folks on the upcoming weather. And that information is contained oftentimes in the discussion piece tab there that you see, which is basically just ripped from our AFD. All right, an example of this is one way in which we view, folks in our office kind of tend to like to view the FLS suite of products. Oftentimes we'll have this on one of our situational awareness displays as well, depending on what's going on otherwise, but it's basically a 4-panel with a fog depth and night fog in the upper left, and then probability of MVFR, IFR, and LIFR in consecutive panels. I think the other one that folks tend to use is having things overlaid if you're going to sample, and we'll have all three of the probabilistic fields on one screen overlaid so that you can kind of see with a cursor, get a cursor readout to see all three of those kind of on top of each other. But this is the way that I prefer to display it, and I know some other folks do as well. We're looking for probabilities greater than 60% or greater to get a little bit more confirmation that a particular category is being met. We certainly don't use these products alone without anything else, obviously, where we can, but to try to gauge whether or not these probability values seem reasonable. And what I sort of try to relay to the staff, and one of the ways that we try to use this, and I put kind of down here similar to what we do with prob severe. Any one probability on its own doesn't mean so much, but if you can put it in context of some sort of a trend, either in space and time, one way or the other can help add that confidence. If you see those probabilities increasing, decreasing, will kind of help in that assessment. Kind of interestingly, tempos, of course, are supposed to be 50% confidence of something happening, or the sort of alternative forecast that something goes wrong. Another way to look at that. But that 50% piece there is kind of interesting when you think about kind of marrying the greater than 60% with that 50% confidence. So again, the point here is to look for the probability trends in these categories, in these graphics, as you're trying to utilize them. That's what we found to be one way to sort of put it into context. All right, very quick example here, just a recent one from July 11th. If you remember back to early July, which seems like a decade ago, we were just getting over 2 tropical storms ago, just getting over Tropical Storm Faye. We had some moisture around. We had a trough kind of centered over the Great Lakes, and our area was sort of impinged here in deep southerly, southwesterly flow with some pretty good moisture advection. So the time that we're looking at is an early morning, 9 to 15 Z on July 11th. And so we are, of course, responsible for issuing our TAFs in and around that time. The concern of that day was a low cloud and low cloud bank, low set of stratus hanging off south of Long Island, actually cutting up through Long Island, up through Connecticut into parts of Rhode Island. The guidance, and one of the things that we like to use at our office is LAMP guidance in terms of, in this case, ceiling probabilities less than 3,000 feet. But you'll notice from the 6Z guidance that morning, you'll see a trend here over the New York area. There's 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. of cooler colors sort of prevailing, indicating that we expect those ceilings to sort of decrease as time went on. And you'll see the eastern part of Long Island there was a little bit slower to do so. That'll become important here in a little while. So the point here is that basically, based on some of this guidance, MVFR ceilings we were anticipating to become less of an issue as Saturday morning went on. Same thing with LAFR ceilings, less than 1,000 feet there, of course. And again, you see low probabilities, less than 30%, as you go to the east over the New York area. Again, from that early morning into about 8 or 9 a.m., those values decreasing with time. So what we're expecting is that the low clouds that we're sort of seeing early on that morning, basically across Long Island, south of Long Island, south of the New York City airport, through Long Island and up into eastern Connecticut and Rhode Island, we're expecting to not be a problem as the morning push for Saturday sort of occurs as well. All right, so here is my 4-panel, and I'm going to let this play a bunch of times because I couldn't slow the thing down. You guys are probably seeing it slower than I am, just based on the GoToMeeting here. But what you'll see is there's your cloud deck hanging off the South Shore, cutting through Islip Airport, and which is out here, and extending on to the northeast. And you'll see this loop here runs from about 10Z on that Saturday morning through about 15Z. And what you'll notice is you have pretty high probabilities of NVFR, 70, 80, 90%, basically from Islip on north, and even some mid-range probabilities that are increasing as time goes on for LAFR conditions here in the lower left. And so it's about 9, 10Z right now. We've just issued our 9Z taps. We're taking a look, and the concern is whether or not, as we're looking back to the southwest, again under that deep southwest flow, is whether or not these conditions, A, are going to linger, and B, how far to the west will they go? In other words, impacting Kennedy and possibly LaGuardia. And so we're looking here at, again, I'm going to let this play one more time, but from 10Z, let it start one more time, watching back to the southwest, those probabilities begin to increase. You'll see it first with MVFR, and then the LAFR by about 12Z starting to make their way towards Kennedy Airport. So our 10Z taps, we decide at that point, and thinking back to that video where you saw sort of the southwestward progression of those probabilistic MVFR fields, we decided to issue a tempo for Kennedy Airport just for an hour, broken at 800. So we decided to go for the whole thing, given what we were seeing with that cloud deck at Islip, which I should mention at the time was, I think, 300 or 400 feet, and going back and forth between broken and overcast. So we knew that within that feature, that there were sub-MVFR and IFR conditions as well. So we decided to tempo it for an hour at 10Z. As we're watching the morning go on, and as we're next hour or two, as we begin to see that stuff within the FLS data begin to show up, sort of building to the south and the west, we get a little nervous. For our 12Z taps, we decide hasn't happened yet, but we're going to push that for another hour, broken 008 at Kennedy. And as time goes on even further, basically by about 12Z, we begin to see things fill in and around Kennedy with those probability values increasing. And we decide at 12Z, we're going to go for the gold and bring that down to IFR conditions with overcast at 003. And that was based basically on the fact that we were watching the combination of the MVFR and the IFR conditions sort of back build, if you will, back to the southwest. decided to do that. So what do we end up with? Pretty clear here. Broken 2800, scattered 400, and then we go overcast 400, overcast 300, and then back up to 300 and then 15,000 by 15Z. So it was a very short period, but kind of an important time there between about 10, 11, 12, 13Z in the morning, when oftentimes you'll have the finishing up of the international flights landing and the morning push from the more domestic and or other international flights early on that morning. So summary and key points here. Again, what we found in this, again, sort of simple example of how we've gotten to use it and sort of trust the FLS output. Useful over the oceanic areas, get a sense of what's there. We've also had some success kind of in the interior for our airports up in the lower Hudson Valley under some conditions as well. But we tend to utilize it a little more over the areas where we don't have other data, i.e. over the oceans, to help support some of that. We use it again as a decision aid in concert with any other observations data sources that we have. We will use it as a gut check for TAP preparation. Oftentimes we'll also use it as an initial to compare with some initial fields with other models to see how other models, short-term models, perhaps where their ceiling grids are initializing, for example. Watch for the trend in the probabilities, either in aerial coverage or in time. Again, the analogy that I'll use is similar to prob severe. The one value by itself may not mean so much, but when you can put it in context temporally, can show a trend over time, and that's really what you want to pay attention for. Folks try to, when comparing probabilities between those three flight categories, again, between MVFR, LIFR, again, we're, in TAF world, we're categorical forecasting anyway. It's the trend, doesn't necessarily have to be the value. And so the trend is really what you want to kind of pay attention to there with respect to those conditions either worsening or kind of alternatively getting out of any of those conditions as well. There's actually quite a bit of training out there. The good folks at SSEC and of course, as mentioned earlier, folks out at FDTD have the recurring webinars for kind of learning a little bit more about and other uses of these products. Again, this is just one simple example. There's many more, and I would certainly encourage folks to attend some of those if you have a chance. And I think with that, I will wrap it up here for the last 5 minutes. Jordan or Mike, whoever is going to take over. The other piece too, as well, I should mention, I actually thought I linked it on here, but I didn't. There's actually, as the satellite community is pretty proficient in doing, there is a fused fog blog that does have several examples going back several years, actually, with some of these products as well, that show some interesting and other applications that for your WFO you may find of use as well. So I think if you just Google Fused Fog Blog SSAC or send an email to Scott Lindstrom, I think, who maintains that, you can check that out as well. So with that, and I see Tim Schmidt is actually sending it in chat here, fusedfog.ssec.wisc.edu. And again, you can Google it or take a look at that with some pretty good real-time examples. With that, Mike, I'll turn it over to you. Questions, discussion, however you guys want to proceed from here.
Thanks, Dave. The other Dave, did you want to say anything first?
No, go ahead, Mike. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Dave. I enjoyed your presentation. We also use the products out here in Medford and are always looking for strategic ways to make it that much more useful. Now's the time, if you're in the audience, if you have any questions for Dave, please submit them into the chat dialogue, and we'll forward them over and facilitate any discussion from here on out. And while we're waiting for additional questions, if there are any.
Actually, this is Dave. I have a question. I don't know who the best person is to answer this. And maybe Lee, if you're on. How do offices make the switch? Is this going to appear in a future RPM build, or how do we wean ourselves onto the SBN version of this data? Unless it happens automatically, which I'm sure it doesn't.
I don't know if Lee is on the call or who that was directed to.
Yeah, Lee, do you want to take that? Lee. Sure, can you hear me okay?
Hey, Lee, yeah, it's Dave. I just was curious if you could give us a kind of a overview of how we would expect to implement this from the SBN in the office. Will this be part of some future RPM or something else?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for your presentation too. It is part of a Tower S RPM. We're releasing it over this past few weeks. It's called version 19. And in that version, there are some new menu options for the fog and low stratus product. They're found under the GOES East and West derived product submenus. They're going to be in this RPM throughout the next several months as we work to get it into the baseline. So these menus and configurations will be updated in a baseline version 21.3.1 that'll be fielded in the summertime next year. So we will migrate those. But for now, using that RPM process, please contact us if we can help in any way. It's that version 19, and it should be available at each WFO and RFC location. There's some instructions that point out where it's located on the DX system, and it can be installed to replace any previous version of the Tower S RPM that might be on the system.
Thank you, Lee. One question for you, Dave. Looking at the 4-panel, one challenge I think we've had, and others may have experienced, is that at times visually, it's difficult to get alert conditions, if you will, to pop from perhaps it's just the color curve used. Have you developed any strategies locally there to make any of the critical information from the FLS products sort of stand out easier for visually?
That's a great question. I should also mention that our office does have we have a separate aviation desk the way that our shifts work. So we have one person that is to aviation on 3 shifts a day basically. So yeah, it's a function of, as with most things color curve and AWIPS related, it's a function of the user. I've noticed most folks do utilize or do at least have the initial that upper end rainbow color that I had there. Mine is adjusted just a little bit to try to highlight the MVFR a little bit more. The other thing I've noticed is some folks will black out stuff that is less than 50% or less than 60%, kind of depending on their own internal calibration. But what I've noticed in our office, at least for the prob stuff, folks generally like some version of that default color curve, and will kind of just adjust it based on their own preferences. So I've not noticed any folks in our office utilizing a drastically different version of what's there.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Dave. Hey, one resource for that might be the BLab page on the store. There's places to submit strategies and whatnot. I think at this point we'll switch back to Jordan to have a session conclusion, and then we'll jump back to a discussion after that for more discussion if there is any. So take it away, Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And we'd like to wrap it up at the bottom of the hour just because we realize that some people have schedules, got to get back to work. So if you'd like to stay on for the discussion, we're going to continue talking to Dave and Mike here for another 15 minutes. But if you have to run, before you go, I just want to point out a few things. One, just like everything, we want your feedback. So let us know how we're doing with the Satellite Book Club and how we can make this a better use of your time. If you're interested in continuing to participate in the Satellite Book Club next week at the same time, 12 noon, we'll have Tony Wimmers, who's an associate scientist at SIMS at Wisconsin. He's going to be talking about the GOES turbulence probability product. So another good aviation talk coming up next week. And if you need assistance installing the Tower S RPM version 19, there's a series of open sessions for users to engage with the Tower S team. So this might be something more for the ITO, maybe the Sue does some of this at your office. Feel free to get in touch with us, and Lee Byerly and John Evans are there for you if you have any issues, because we do realize that you might want to get this fog and low stratus product with the Tower SRPM. So with that, thanks for joining us today. Stay well, and hope you're able to sit with us a little longer for the discussion. Take care, everybody. Bye. And back over to you.
Okay, this is Mike again. For those of you remaining on the call, again, if you have any questions for Dave or to bring up for discussion, please submit those into the chat dialogue, and we'll continue where we left off here. I see that Brian Mata had a question. How well can you distinguish shallow freezing fog from non-freezing fog with the use of these products? Dave, have you had any experience with that?
Now, we haven't had, in the last couple of years, we haven't had a large extent of freezing. I mean, for us, that's more for our interior areas, and we've had good success, fair to good success overall with this product picking out the onset of fog. But again, this is a situation where we would be certainly utilizing other observations to supplement the satellite. So we wouldn't be relying solely on the satellite information in those locations, like unlike over some of the open ocean area, as I mentioned before. Haven't had a good freezing fog event in the last couple of years.
Okay. Yeah, I think part of that answer there, Brian, it's critical to be overlaying current observational data with the fog and low stratus products, and that certainly is a necessary complement to making use of these effectively, as I can see anyhow. Let's see. Pat had a question. Is the fog and low stratus probabilities available on the web? Anybody answer that one?
There's probably some, I'm sure there's others that can answer better. I used, and to go back and look, at one point, although I haven't done this recently, at one point, the SSEC Real Earth, for those that are familiar with that, did have some of this on there. I think I went back recently and it either didn't work or I couldn't get the date loaded that I wanted, but I believe that the Real Earth from SSEC did at one point have an archive.
Yeah.
And Scott Lindstrom actually is, Scott's showing us.
Scott did just post the URL there in chat. So on the sims.ssec.wisc.edu/geocat page, you can see the FLS products. Real Earth is trying to get them back in, says Scott. Okay, Pat said thank you. We'll pause here for a second, see if anybody has any additional questions. Dave, while folks are pondering, I had a question. Do you think that the usefulness of these products are heightened in any particular synoptic situation? In other words, do you see that they're more useful, for instance, in a synoptic scale snowstorm barreling in versus a radiational fog setting, or is there a particular setup where you have more confidence in using these products versus others? Have you come to conclusions on any of that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mike. I mean, yeah, for us, it's the onshore flow. It's the any synoptic or otherwise. It's onshore flow. We've I would say probably equal confidence, maybe a little more so in synoptic situations with this stuff. But we've had cases of radiational cooling and things like that that are maybe a little more, a little smaller, a little more mesoscale in nature, where it may take a little additional time, for the FLS products to sort of catch up. if we have OBS fortunate enough nearby. But I would say maybe the tip goes to the synoptic scale flow for us, or synoptic scale type events. But really, the biggest use for us really is filling in the data voids. And so for us, that's any southerly, southwesterly flow, with good moisture advection, that sort of stuff, for developing or maintaining, basically Stratus in those kinds of situations. That's been really our biggest benefit so far with utilizing these products, for sure. Good question.
Let's see here. Brian Mata is posing a couple more questions here in the chat, and is wondering, has GOES East been compared to GOES West? Anybody in the audience care to address that one? I understand that the GOES West products will become operational here. I know the initial intent was for that to occur early in the 2021 calendar year, and always looking for updates on that if anybody knows more. So Lee says, with respect to the Nestis product, the GOES West is still in development, and we learned it's expected to be ready for operations around the summer of 21. Haven't seen GOES 17 yet from Nestis. And Mike Pavalonis also chimed in. They have been compared and are similar. GOES 17 products will not become operational until 2021. So I think we're all looking around the corner at the end of the year here until the GOES 17 products become operational.
Yeah, let me just make one more plug here, and actually seeing Mike on the chat reminded me that one of, I should have said this at the beginning and didn't. Same thing with ProbSevere. These probabilistic products, one of the real draws to them is that they're satellite plus really a background field of something. And so that, that fused piece where you have multiple data sets kind of, blended together or utilized together rather, is one thing that we really appreciate. I know I certainly appreciate, in talking with some other folks, love that approach. And you all on the research side that are working on this, thanks for doing that. But these blended approaches where it's not solely satellite or not solely NWP or solely one sensor, suite of sensors with a little additional information really is the way to go. So just wanted to point that out. And FLS is a great example of that.
Okay. Thanks, you guys. One other question from Brian. Have there been any cases of super fog noted in the FLS products? I know that we do use some strategies out here. I know that Chris Gibson, the Sioux in Missoula, had developed a procedure for creating super fog grids in GFE, if you will. Have there been any cases of super fog noted from the FLS products? Anybody have an answer for that? Yeah.
Well, I can say we haven't in New York, at least recently. Okay.
Yeah, Brian, I had also not heard of using the FLS products in the assessment of super fog out here, but Chris might be somebody to address with that question. Okay, anybody else have any questions for discussion here? Watching the chat dialogue. Okay. Well, not hearing anything. I think we'll probably turn it back over to you, Jordan, for any final remarks.
Well, I just want to thank you, Mike, and thank you, Dave, for your presentation. This was great. I think this is going to be a great product to be rolled out nationally, and hopefully it'll take roots in supporting aviation services that the Weather Service provides. So anybody on the call has any questions that come up afterwards, please get in touch with us. every product that we send out over the satellite broadcast network, we want it, we're really seeking to see that adopted widespread use throughout the agency. So with that, thank you for joining us, our audience, and take care. Have a good one.
Thank you, everybody.